house prices, cars, the price of everything is going up. You don't have to be an economist to know that inflation is back at the highest levels in 18 years. The question is, for how long and what's coming next? These are the questions that keep the Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem up at night. His job, the bank's job, is to keep the inflation rate at just 2%. That's the target. But with inflation projected to rise close to 5% by the end of the year, that's getting increasingly hard. So what are they doing? Well, in late October, the bank ended their program to buy bonds and increase the money supply to keep the struggling economy going. It's called quantitative easing. But for most people, the real question is, are interest rates about to go up? What will all this do for your mortgage? To find out more, I sat down with Tiff Macklem, the governor of the Bank of Canada. Governor, a pleasure to welcome you on the program.
Great to be here.
Inflation.
Welcome to the Bank of Canada.
Yeah, well, it's a heck of a building. The inflation genie, many say, is out of the bottle again for the first time in a long time. Highest rate in 18 years. It's hurting people. What's driving this? And the real question for most people is, how long is this going to last?
Evan, two things off the top. First of all, every time we survey Canadians, what do we hear? They don't like inflation. They don't like the cost of living going up. And we know that, the rising prices we're seeing for mostly internationally traded goods, that is stretching people's ability to stretch their income to pay their bills. The next thing I would say is that I do want to assure Canadians that we are going to keep inflation under control. We know what our job is. Our job is to make sure that the increases we're seeing in globally traded prices today don't turn into generalized and enduring inflation in Canada. And we have the tools, we have the mandate, and we have been, and we will be adjusting our tools to bring inflation back to target.
The term that economists keep using is this, don't worry, folks, this is transitory. Okay, it was transitory a little while back, and it's persistent. And now the bank's even saying it's going to persist longer than we thought. Maybe that's the wrong word. What's a better word to describe what's going on than transitory?
I'll take that on board. I think transitory to economists means sort of not permanent. Right. I think to a lot of people, transitory means it's going to be over quickly. And maybe, I don't know exactly what the right word is, but it's probably something like, transitory but not short-lived. And what can I be more precise about that? A week ago, we put out a new economic projection for Canada. And we do have inflation. It's running 4.5% now. We think it's going to go up to close to 5%. And then over the course of next year, we think as we get to around the end of next year, it's going to be around 2%. So that's what we mean by transitory but not short-lived.
Okay, but in June 2020, you were saying, hey, I'm more worried about deflation than inflation. Now we're at 5% inflation. I guess the question is, are you in control? If inflation is global supply chains, global COVID issues, tensions with China, there's a lot of juggling balls that everyone in this building and you are trying to figure out. So people say, well, boy, the governor seems confident, but is the governor in control?
There's no question. We've never been through a pandemic before like this. We've never closed an economy. We've never reopened an economy. The good news is we are reopening the economy. The economy has come a long way back, and now we're facing a lot of the challenges of reopening an economy. We've said for all along it's going to be choppy, it's going to be bumpy, and it is. But are we in control? Yes, we're in control. We have the tools. We are using them. Last week we took some important steps to adjust our monetary settings, and we're going to continue to adjust our monetary settings. And the goal here is to secure that complete recovery and bring inflation back to target.
People are listening and they say, okay, interest rates. That they say noise. Will the governor have to jack interest rates to stop inflation? Should people ask me every day, and if you're asking me, you're in desperate trouble. Should we lock in? I don't know, but what's the message to people? Are they worried that we're about to get into a new era of high interest rates?
So I'm not going to give people investment advice, but what I will say is, so last week when we updated our projections, what we said is the time when we're going to likely be considering raising interest rates is probably going to be sooner than we thought. Last week we said it's going to be sometime around the middle of next year. And if you want it in months, sometime between April and September. That's how we see things right now. Of course, we're going to get new information. The economy is going to keep evolving. We may have to adjust that. But right now, what we're saying is, interest rates have been low for long. They're not going to be as low for as long.
Right. My parents would say, I remember 18%, 20% interest rates. But when you're saying, I'm just trying to get some perspective, we're not talking about, we're going to go from the historic lows back into what were, in some cases, historic highs. What are we talking about? Are we talking about going up a point or two, or are we talking about strap in 5-8% higher?
Let's just think about where we are right now. Our policy right now is at 0.25%. That's as low as it can go.
Right.
So when we talk about coming to the time considering raising interest rates, we're talking about moving up to still pretty low rates, but off these ultra low rates.
What factors on the horizon are you watching for that may drive inflation? People say, gosh, I'm worried about China. Gosh, I'm worried about we're getting vaccinated, but, the continent of Africa's got 4%. I don't know if there's going to be a fifth wave somewhere else. I'm worried about supply chain issues. What factors do you watch that may disrupt the forecast?
Well, you just named, we watch all those factors you just named, but let me focus in on some of them that we're particularly focused on. So these global supply chain issues, why, what are they, where are they coming from? Why are they more persistent? Well, we've seen this. The good news is we've seen this rapid surge in global demand for goods. The global economy is recovering. The problem is supply is still impaired. There are still production problems in parts of the world because plants have to get shut down because of outbreaks of COVID. There are shipping bottlenecks. There's problems at ports. There are good reasons to believe that, as the world gets more vaccinated, as investments in logistics take place, and as consumers shift, we've been buying a lot of goods because we can't get services. But as now we can get services. So as consumers, households start to shift back to more services and less goods, those goods, they won't have to get produced, they won't have to get shipped. That'll take some pressure off.
It's very rare that the Bank of Canada and you get politicized, but you've seen Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative MP, tweets about you a lot, and the bank. The allegation is that the, quote, printing of money, quantitative easing, the buying of bonds to increase the money supply that people may hear about, is actually one of the key causes, and that rolling it back has vindicated the critics that say at the behest of the Trudeau government, the Bank of Canada is, quote, printing money, and that's caused inflation. Of course, the bank is independent from the government. But what do you make of, those criticisms, and what's the response to your policies are causing inflation?
So first of all, I want to be very clear. Our policies are guided by achieving our inflation target. These extraordinary measures we took, as you said earlier, over a year ago, at the start of the pandemic, inflation was actually negative. The big fear was deflation. We took extraordinary measures to help Canadians get through this, support that recovery, and to a large extent, it's worked. Obviously, fiscal policy has played an important role as well. And of course, vaccination policy, critical. You can't have a healthy economy without healthy people. That has been our guide. With respect to quantitative easing, yes, it's a new tool. It's not the same thing. We're not printing banknotes to buy government bonds. We are creating settlement balances, which is a kind of central bank money. But the important message to Canadians is quantitative easing, buying government bonds, is just a different way of lowering interest rates.
See, I can see your time as a dean of a school is paying off as you explain these things, which is good. There is another issue, which is the housing market. And people are saying, well, low rates are driving crazy house prices. And we've got concerns now about a housing bubble. Do you have concerns about that?
We have for some time expressed concern about housing. It is a vulnerability here in Canada. Some households are overstretching to get that house. It was a vulnerability before the pandemic.
Right.
The pandemic has actually increased demand for bigger houses because we've been spending so much time at home. People are working at home, children are studying at home, people want bigger houses, and interest rates are low, and that is fueling strong demand for housing. And there is a risk you get into these extrapolative expectations. People have a fear of missing out. I get letters from Canadians. I get letters from young families. I recognize people are having a hard time. And, really the solution to this problem is supply. We've got to increase supply of housing. We've been in this for about a decade in Canada, and I am pleased to see that there is greater recognition around Ottawa in the provinces that really the solution is we've got to accelerate supply.
A lot of Canadians are saying our deficit has passed $1 trillion. We have subsidized industries, so our debts are passing $1 trillion. Our deficits are, $280 billion. I'm worried. Deficits are too high, debts are too high, subnational debts in the provinces, consumer. Do those worry you? Are we approaching kind of the thing that you kind of wake up at night and say, holy Mackinac, I'm worried about this stuff?
Look, Canada was fortunate that it went into this crisis with the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. From a monetary perspective, we hadn't done quantitative easing back in 08-09. We had one of the smallest balance sheets among leading central banks. So on both fronts, that meant Canada could have a full-bore response. On both fiscal and monetary policy, there was, they were extraordinary measures taken rapidly in scale. There was a lot of firepower, and that has really helped Canadians. It put a floor under this crisis. It supported people that were put out of work through no fault of their own through this crisis, and that has been a key to supporting this recovery. As we come out of this now, we're scaling those things back. Last week, we ended our large-scale bond buying program, quantitative easing. The government most of the government extraordinary measures have expired. There's some certain targeted ones, but those things are getting scaled back. The message is, look, when you've got your firepower, you're in a crisis, you want to use it effectively. As things normalize, you want to withdraw for that so that you don't create a structural deficit problem. In the government's own projections, they have the debt to GDP ratio stabilizing, comes down a titch. We still have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and the plan is to stabilize it. So, look, you definitely want to keep your eye on that, but I don't think we're in the danger